So thank you, Sarah Nguyen, for joining us for our artist talk. Her exhibition is currently on view at the Pump House. Sarah is a multimedia artist. Her work has appeared in solo and group exhibits and publications nationally and internationally. She received her BFA in illustration from RISD and her MFA in painting from the University of Arts in Philadelphia. With this body of work, Sarah uses a balance of abstract and representational forms in order to sever the connection between shape and meaning, connecting the viewer instead to the cut of the knife so that she or he becomes complicit in the art. Folklore, reverence, refinement of nature, observance of daily life are just some of the concepts behind her work. So thank you, Sarah, for joining us. And if you'd like to talk a little bit about your exhibit, so they were named, that'd be great.
Thank you so much. My work starts with a story, a traditional folk tale or fable or contemporary poem. And then from there, the work is propelled even further from those narratives, and every sort of mark making that takes place in the aftermath is used to support those stories. So the stories that I'm working with here is a series of stories that relate to women named in the Old Testament. I look at those stories simply as stories, as folklore. There's really no religious backing behind how I'm approaching this. And these stories approach gender issues that, of course, took place back then and take place now. And they sort of engage with these texts emotionally and intellectually and hopefully aesthetically. So what I'm reaching for is symbols of a universal language, such as the symbols of nature and the symbols of the environment. And so in many of these stories, you can connect with the text through simply through natural and environmental symbols and icons. So in terms of how I work and my process is, again, I start with the story and then I bring sort of a personal take to it. I do a lot of research into how these stories have been told and how other people have retold them visually, and what I could bring to it. I don't think I'm ever adding something new, but I want to add to the dialogue that has already taken place. And after that research, I have a general idea of how I want the piece to look, and I draw it out, and then I begin to cut. And I cut with a knife. All of these pieces are hand cut on Tyvek, and I use an X-Acto knife. And I just go from there. So it's very meditative, very improvised. And it's within that process, these ideas are hopefully somewhat revealed, if not in a very, narrative way. They are somewhat revealed to the viewer in that they can grasp somewhat of this universal language of nature and the environment. And then if they care to sort of look and see what the title is or the artist statement behind it, understand that these symbols that they are seeing through the cut paper, the shadows that they are seeing behind the cut paper, are part of the drama of the work. Yeah, that is basically what this work is about. All this work was done during 2020 and the beginning of 2021. And it has somewhat of this monochromatic feel to it, simply because these 2 years really have been without color for me personally. It was very hard to imbue color and joy into this work during this time. So they are both this immediate reflection of my time and space, and also looking back at these older texts and the symbols that they created.
Wonderful. Could you talk a little bit about maybe the scale or the presentation of your works?
Yes. So most of these pieces, I think, are around 8 feet or 9 feet at the longest, in terms of their length, 4 feet to even 6 feet across. The smallest ones are about 2.5 feet across by usually 7 or 8 feet. In terms of the approach I take with this type of work is I like to make an impact with the work itself, and scale tends to do that. From afar, I think it's hard. You see first the scale of the piece, and you sort of see that, oh yeah, there's something going on there texturally, and hopefully that brings you in enough to see the amount of details that each piece has. Again, everything was hand cut with an X-Acto knife, so and the pieces themselves have a lot of detail. I work towards a variety of different types of marks, using just one tool. So I'm always pushing to see what this blade and the X-Acto knife will make. And then, of course, what I'm interested in once the piece is displayed is the shadow narrative behind it, that shadow play. And I often refer to these pieces as shadow drawings. So how is the light playing? How does the piece move when someone enters into the space? And part of interacting with these pieces is to go behind them, and often much is revealed. So for instance, the piece that we are seeing here called To Breathe, Eve to Breathe, there are Hebrew letters actually written that's over and over again that make up that textural image of the piece. And the Hebrew for Eve is also the Hebrew for to breathe. And so if you look at the shadows behind it, you could actually read it rather than seeing it face on. So it's within the shadow that you can see it. And again, this piece was made at the very beginning of the height of the pandemic in March, where everything sort of shut down. And the coronavirus symbol, that microscopic symbol of the coronavirus, is repeated over and over here. But it is also referring to that Old Testament view of what happened with Eve in the Garden of Eden, and the interpretation that Eve was the one who started she made it so humans were expelled from the Garden of Eden, and so carrying that burden and the weight of the death of humans and what sort of happened there. So yes, I hope that answers that question.
Yes, that's wonderful. Is there anything else you would like to share about your exhibit?
I love how everything is exhibited. I'm really thrilled that the shadow play is happening, and that some of the pieces are in archways here. So I think it is something that I really do hope people do get to see in person, because that large interaction that takes place. But I've been very happy and honored to show here. So yeah.
Wonderful. So thank you for joining us, Sarah, and please come and see the exhibit.